All right, can everyone see?
Yeah, we can see
Okay.
your screen and we can hear you clearly.
Okay, great. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you, Timothy, for inviting me and settling the scheduling so I could do this after work because of the great time difference between us. Anyway, the title of my talk is Languages, a way to explore science. I'm Ryan and I'm still in the university as a second. I just finished my second year in university, and as an avid language learner, I think using languages has helped me in a way to explore the sciences, and I'll be sharing about how I learn languages and its applications in sciences, as well as the experiences and opportunities that I have gotten from mixing the two of them together. So, why is it not moving? Okay, so a bit of an introduction about myself. I am a native bilingual in Singapore because we have a bilingual policy. So we are expected to learn a working language, which is English, and our mother tongue. And my mother tongue is Chinese, and I'm fluent somewhat in French, and my dialect group is Cantonese. So I am a heritage speaker of Cantonese. Currently, I'm learning Arabic, Malay, and Tamil out of a long list of other languages. But currently, these three are the ones that I'm focusing on. As a science student, I'm a chemistry undergraduate at the National University of Singapore. And while I'm still exploring other fields, my interests currently are in nanomaterials and catalysts. Other outside of that, I'm also an educator, curriculum developer, and a junior mentor or a tutor. So let's first look at my language learning journey. Much of my education has only been in English and Chinese. I only started to pick up a third language when I was in secondary school, because it's only in secondary school where some of us are offered to take up a foreign language, and I chose French out of a list of 5 languages, I think, for no particular reason other than the fact that I found it interesting and French cuisine was interesting. And also, I think it's kind of a problem, I put in inverted commas, a problem for language learners, that once you see a language and then you see other things, you want to pick more things up, right? So at that point, I also thought to myself, why not I pick up Japanese? And from then on, that sort of kickstarted my language learning journey. Although if you look at this timeline over here, the majority of my language learning journey has been predominantly in French, because I was still in school and I didn't really have the time to pick up other languages, and I was focusing on French itself. But French has helped me to explore other places. Like in 2014, I went to Brest, and in 2016, I went to Toulouse. Toulouse was the place where I had the most fun using French, because I was somewhat a bit more conversationally fluent and could survive in a francophone environment. And this picture over here is taken in Toulouse with my class, right? So it was at the Airbus, at the museum over there. And while we were there, I had to do a small poster a small poster thing about Veolia, about their water treatment methods and all of that. So that was kind of where it started, where I started to use languages in science, because while I was there, I had to figure out what in the world they were talking about. And it was quite difficult, because while I could pick out certain words that were certain technical words that seem similar, right? Like perhaps purification of water. The rest seemed kind of foreign, especially even though I know the concept, but because it's in a different language, it kind of seemed more foreign to me. But from then on, I realized that, okay, perhaps I could approach sciences in that way as well. I could start reading about the topics that I know in a different language. And yeah, from then on, other than that, I started doing other languages after I graduated from junior college, and yeah, and now I'm in university where I have a bit more time to do languages. So in science, we have seen languages almost everywhere, but to narrow it down to two main cases in chemistry, we have nomenclature in organic chemistry, such as the easy isomerism for organic molecules, such as these two. I don't learn German, so I might butcher the pronunciation, but for the E isomer, it is named after entgegen, which means opposite, and that's why you see over here. So you see over here, they are on opposite sides of the double bond. Whereas for the Z isomer, it is zusammen, which means together, and you see they are on the same side. So I think that depending on who teaches you about such things, they might not bring in the concept of what the E and the Z means, but they probably just tell you, oh, E means, if you see that the thing is like this, it is E. If you see that it's like that, it's Z. So I think one way that made learning nomenclature more interesting for me was to find out where these names came from. Although it's not applicable in every single case, because sometimes I think scientists just attribute something convenient to it, right? So it's not always the case, but it's interesting to put, because nomenclature can tend to be a bit boring and dry because we're just remembering names and how to name things. But yeah, we always find some reason to make things interesting. And in spectroscopy, actually I didn't know this until somebody was wondering, or rather a group of us were wondering why it's called R and the P branch. But in this spectroscopy, which is if I remember correctly, it's rho vibrational spectroscopy, there are two different types of branches, which one is called the R branch and the other one is called the P branch. So R actually stands for riche, which means rich, and the P actually stands for pauvre, which means poor, right? So why it is called rich is because you can see that it's actually at a higher energy level because it goes to a higher energy transition state, and poor for P, P for poor, is because it goes to a lower transition state. And that's why I presume it's the reason why it's called R and the P branch. Okay, so how languages can be a tool, or at least how I figured out it could be a tool, is that I think I only figured this out one day when I was at language classes, right? So I think languages can help to be a starting point for scientific communication, because the point of scientific communication is always to bring, not dumb down is kind of the negative word to use, but to bring science to be more accessible to a larger community. And the problem usually is that when we bring very large concepts and explain it to other people, some people might find that we use too much technical jargon that they don't understand, which makes science less accessible. And the problem with it being less accessible is that people might tend to come up with their own explanations, which can be a bit disastrous in certain cases. So in this particular example that I put here, it started off because for my Arabic classes, I think it's kind of a common thing in most language classes where the starting point of the lesson is always how is everybody, what have you been doing, or just describe your day, right? So I realized that for the past 2 years that I've been learning Arabic, my responses have always been extremely uncreative, in a sense that because I'm trying to tell the truth, and the truth is that I'm still in the university studying, there's really only so many ways I can say I'm studying. Like, oh, I have a test, I'm studying, or I'm doing this, I have a long day. But currently, because I'm a research intern at a lab doing working on battery materials and electrocatalytic materials, so I thought, okay, I must make a difference this time and try to say something interesting, right? And that was when I realized that I could try to use a language that I'm not exactly fluent in to try to put my my research into simpler terms for people. This is not a perfect example, but I tried. So in Arabic, I just made it very simple and I said, oh, I tried to change the material of batteries to make them better, which I think is a good starting point for perhaps to describe a research topic or something that you're particularly interested in to a group of people who are not in your field. So languages can be a helpful tool in that sense to start that thinking process. So the question now is, because I had to use that example for scientific communication in that use simpler terms, is there really a need to learn technical vocabulary? I would say yes and no. Technical vocabulary is useful in a sense that if you want to approach other other sources in different languages, because perhaps a certain field is more like a certain region is more specialized in a particular field, they might publish like normal news articles about certain things in obviously their regional language. So learning technical vocabulary is important in that sense, and there are a lot of different ways that you can pick up technical vocabulary. Personally, even though I'm a native Chinese speaker, I don't exactly know all the technical terms for chemistry stuff. Like I didn't even know, and okay, I don't know most of the things here, but yes. And on the right over here is just a small summary notes document thing that I found by the Société Chimique de France about ligands and complexes. Now, instead of looking at these things, actually there is a very, very simple way to learn technical vocabulary, which is actually just by using Wikipedia. So this thing is actually something known as Oswald ripening, regardless of what that means. You can just click, okay, depending on where this option is in your browser. Wikipedia usually has a list of languages that a list of languages for that particular article. So what I used to do, or I still do, is that when I want to read more about a particular thing that interests me, I will search it in perhaps English, like Oswald ripening, and then I will click the language option here and change it to a language that I know, or my target language. So I could change it to French, and in French we would have it like this. And because it's a Wikipedia article, it tends to have a lot of explanations and a lot of other things. So you can learn more technical vocab from there. And I think perhaps as a scientist or a science student, or regardless of what field you are in, if you want to read material in another language, it is always good to pick up the technical vocabulary so you could work more from there. And yeah, so that's about technical vocabulary. Now, I would say no to learning technical vocabulary in a different from a different perspective, right? So when we were in the teaching lab for our lab classes, most of the teaching assistants are actually PhD students, and PhD students they're not always local, right? They come from different countries, international students. So in this particular organic chemistry lab class, our lab teaching assistants were Chinese students and they were PhD students in organic chemistry. So the thing I realized is that that they could communicate with us perfectly in English, and that their knowledge of scientific terms is actually wonderful in English. Not that the English is bad, I'm not saying that, but because organic chemistry experiments tend to take quite some time of waiting, like when we do a synthesis, it takes at least a few hours. So in that few hours, you can't really do anything. So the teaching assistants would be sitting there, and it's kind of awkward if they're just sitting there and everybody is in complete silence. So what I did was I would try to speak with them. And okay, I personally think it's a bit it's not very nice to speak to them immediately in Chinese, because some people might look at it like, oh, you're looking down on their language proficiency. But they just naturally started speaking to me in Chinese. And from there, we just got to know each other better, and it made lab classes a bit less boring, in the sense that the waiting time, the downtime was filled with such entertainment. And these grad students were very happy to discuss with us about their lab life, what it's like to do graduate studies, and they even suggested to us that they could be a point of contact between us and their lab supervisor, so that in the event that we want to do a research project in their lab, they could help to facilitate that process. So I think it's kind of a way of networking in that sense. And in another way, we can think of it that because English is kind of the language that we use to communicate science, be it in journal publications or conferences even, using another language can help to not to bring the argument away from the science, but bring it more down to a more friendly and personal level, so that you can get to know people a bit better, which worked for me in this case. Another example I give is I'm in this program known as the Special Program in Science in the National University of Singapore, and well, of course, I mean universities are an international community, but because I had my first 2 years of university education was in COVID, so I didn't really have the chance to go down to the campus, and most if not all of my lessons were online. But while I was in this special program, I got to know we are a tight-knit community, so I got to know a lot of people from different places, and we all speak. Of course, English is our common language, but some of us speak Chinese, some of us speak Cantonese, some of us speak Flemish, some speak French, and many other languages. So from there, we kind of bonded in that sense, where I can speak to different people and they can also speak to a lot of other people. Currently, I am working with one of the lecturers here. She's French, and we kind of started talking, discussing about stuff about the lecture content in French. And she said it was a bit of a challenge for her because she spent a large amount of her time doing science in English, and she can't really she can't really express herself in French anymore. So it was also a challenge for her and myself. And yeah, so we used the opportunity to practice French. It's kind of ironic, but yeah. So currently, I'm also working on a research project with her in educational research for one of the modules. Yeah, and so I think languages, in summary, can help us to bridge some gaps, bridge some barriers, and make new friends and get to do more stuff. And with that, I come to the end of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Ryan. That was, we say in English, music to my ears. Especially, I really like the way how you find so many opportunities to find language within science, and also your idea of using Wikipedia in order to expand our scientific vocabulary, so we can participate in scientific discussions in other languages. That's